Immigration protests, the big beautiful bill, and a rescinded invitation to the White House. There's a lot to talk to U.S. Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, about this morning. Senator, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's first start there with this picnic you were supposed to attend with your grandson. You found out yesterday, no longer welcome. What's the scoop?
You know, it's kind of sad, but also kind of pathetic. The Congressional Picnic was started by Ronald Reagan. It's actually called the Congressional Picnic because all of Congress is involved and all of Congress is invited with their family. And it's been going on for, 40 some odd years. During President Obama's term, I was a pretty significant critic of President Obama. I filibustered his CIA director for 13 hours. And yet President Obama didn't think that there was a reason to personally exclude one member of Congress. I think I'm the first member of Congress ever excluded from the Congressional Picnic. So it wasn't that I wasn't invited. I was invited like everybody else. Then they just decided at the end to disinvite me or blackball me from the picnic. But I think it's pathetic, it's petty, it's childish, and really it demeans the White House and the presidency because we're making honest arguments about whether or not the bill that they have put forward will add to the debt or not add to the debt. And this is an important discussion, but to make it petty about, disinviting my family, including my grandson and my kids who have flown up from Kentucky to be part of the picnic is just, I don't know, it's a level of pettiness not often seen, really.
Okay, so describe the relationship you have right now with the president. Obviously, you have been very vocal about your opposition to the spending bill, the so-called big beautiful bill.
You know, what I've told him about the big beautiful bill, and we've had several long conversations about it, is that I support the tax cuts. I support making the tax cuts permanent. I voted for them in 2017. I accept the argument that when you reduce rates, often revenue will increase. So I think the 2017 tax cuts actually did pay for themselves. I think we need more significant spending cuts in the bill. And so I've argued for more spending cuts. But my main objection is that they increase the debt ceiling or the credit line $5 trillion. And this is extraordinary. This is the largest increase in the debt ceiling in our history. And frankly, it's the opposite of what we should do. You know, if you're a teenager, you gave them a credit card at 16 and they ran it up to $2,000 in the limit within a month, and would you go to them and say, oh, hon, why don't we give you another $10,000 in credit? No, you would restrict their credit. So we have to pay our bills, we have to raise the debt ceiling, but we should do it a little bit at a time and continue to talk about the reforms necessary rather than just putting it on the back burner and, 2-3 years from now saying, oh, we'll talk about it then.
Senator, I want to talk about the protests that have been happening across the country, particularly in Los Angeles. There's been a lot made about whether or not the military should be involved in Los Angeles. Where do you stand on that?
I think my first impression is that I'm appalled by people marching, carrying a foreign flag, carrying the Mexican flag, burning down, automobiles, attacking federal troops, attacking federal officers trying to enforce the federal law. We decided really probably with the Civil War and particularly with the Civil Rights Movement that the federal law has supremacy. We sent federal troops into Arkansas to prevent the states from segregating students. So there is precedent for the federal government to be involved. My preference still would always be local law enforcement because I think they're better at it. But the local law enforcement, including the local government, the mayor of Los Angeles and the governor of California are saying, we're not going to do anything about this. And mayhem is ruling. This is what happened in Wisconsin with the George Floyd riots, is that they just got out of control. And so I have not really been criticizing the president over this because I think, preventing violence and having law and order is incredibly important.
Senator, what do you think about the tactics that the Trump administration is using to carry out these deportation raids? Governor Gavin Newsom said that there was a scene at the Home Depot. We've seen one officer running after somebody in a strawberry field. What do you think about the tactics?
Well, I mean, if people have broken the law and they're criminals, particularly if they're violent criminals and they're running away, law enforcement chases them. So we don't typically put pictures up of the Louisville police chasing somebody who's committed a crime, and we then accuse the Louisville police of chasing people. So I would say that it depends on exactly what the crime is. So I think as far as tolerance, of arresting people, if it's people that have been convicted of violent crimes or felony convictions, and they're also here illegally, and we're chasing them down wherever they are, including California, I don't think people are going to object to that too much. If it goes beyond that, if they're chasing people down on construction sites, or people who work in homes, or people who take care of the elderly, there is a point at which there will be a reaction, including mine. But I think right now, I would say that as I watch them arrest people who committed violent crimes, I'm not as up in arms about the tactics.
Let's talk FEMA for a moment if we can. It's been helping several people in Kentucky who have been battered by round after round of storms here in the Commonwealth. At the same time, the president says he wants storm relief and that sort of thing to be more of a state situation instead of FEMA. He doesn't necessarily like FEMA. What do you think about that?
Our office is working full-time to help people with FEMA. I just was down in London and in Somerset looking at the damage, particularly in London, there at the airport and the neighborhoods around the airport. It was just devastating. I saw one double-wide trailer sort of right across from the airport terminal, and I think there were 5 or 6 or 7 people in there as a storm. They tried to get out to get into an underground shelter, but it was too dangerous to leave. But everything was destroyed around them. They were the only building left standing. The tornado literally missed them by feet. And so I guess the first thing when a tragedy happens like this is that we should try to help those in tragedy. We should mourn those who we lost. We lost, 19, 20 Kentuckians. This happened in Bowling Green a couple of years ago. So there is a time and a place for policy, and I'm happy to talk about policy, but not without first saying that our office is helping people with FEMA and will help them. Ultimately, we have to figure out how to finance these things, and everything in government is $2 trillion in the hole. So one of the proposals is to share the expenses between state and federal government. That doesn't mean we're for less FEMA. It means that part of the payment coming from the state government of Kentucky doesn't have a printing press. They don't have a Federal Reserve. So there are more limitations, and they will have to be more frugal and wise with their spending than they will be in Washington. In Washington, the reason our debt is so enormous is we just print up money to pay for it. But that leads to inflation and has led to this $36 trillion debt. So we can't get away from looking at things, even things that people generally want, like FEMA to help them, and even things I support, such as trying to get that money to people. Ultimately, there will have to be a debate over how to best finance these. But in the meantime, like I say, our office is trying to help people get connected to FEMA if they have a problem.
Senator, I remember when we had a caucus here in Kentucky because you were also running for president. Do you have any plans to run for president in the future?
A little too early to talk about that. We'll decide that over the future. I do know one thing for sure, that within the Republican Party and the battle for what kind of dream or vision for the country we have, I think there's a populist wing of the Republican Party, and then there's the more free market wing that I'm part of. And I do want there to be a voice for people who believe that trade is good, that it makes our country rich, that it makes Kentucky rich, that Kentucky having Toyota in our state is a good thing. Kentucky having Suntory Corporation that owns Jim Beam and other bourbon distilleries is a good thing, not a bad thing. We have a German brake manufacturer. We got Mitsubishi in Bowling Green. All of these countries that interact with us is a good thing. And I think the populism is getting towards sort of hatred of foreigners and hatred of any kind of foreign interaction. And that I think we need to have another alternative. And so we'll see what happens over time, but it's too early for me to, decide on any of that.
All right, a lot to talk about, a lot going on. A U.S. Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, thank you for the time, sir.
Thank you.